Bitcoin is down on the year and has now spent more consecutive days in extreme fear than at any point in history. Hey, everyone's waiting for the next crash. Damn it. They're looking for a headline, a panic, a single moment where everything breaks. But that's not what's coming. What's coming is quieter, slower, more structural. In this video, I'm going to break down the 5 macro forces reshaping the global economy and why, in my view, 2026 is going to be a very bullish year for Bitcoin. I'm Oceans. This is Beyond Bitcoin. Let's go. Extreme fear doesn't mean Bitcoin is broken. Historically, it means the market is early. Price is reacting to uncertainty, capital is reacting to pressure, and narratives haven't caught up yet. That's the environment Bitcoin was designed for. So instead of staring at the price, which we all love doing, I want us to look at some global forces that are coming down the pipeline that may tip the scale. 5 forces, to be exact. Number 1, fragmentation. We've been hearing about these Trump tariffs for the past year. Just listen to this recent clip from the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent.
There's a lot going on. I would categorize 2025. We had some important victories, some important policy announcements, some important movement. But as I've described it, 2025 was setting the table. And especially on the economy, I think the feast and the banquet's going to be in 2026.
Scott, it seems like the tariffs have had an enormously positive impact. It's given you a lot of tools in the toolbox to work with. Why do you think so many people got it wrong? A lot of people I'm sure that you've known and worked with in your prior life as a hedge fund manager. What did they get wrong? What did they miss that you were able to see?
Well, a couple of things. I think people didn't have an open mind. They became the Trump tariffs, which immediately a large cohort, whether it was government officials, industry people, the general population, because President Trump wanted to do it, it must be bad. I said the other day, President Trump cured cancer, but it caused dandruff. Then people would say, well, President Trump has caused a dandruff epidemic. And look, there's a lot of orthodoxy that hasn't worked. If we look back, early 2000s, letting China into the global trading system, that they would become more like us. And there was a point, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to the people who believe that, but by 2013, when Xi Jinping came in, and great writers like Elizabeth Economy, who had been of that view, reversed and said, he's a different kind of cat. It's no longer going to be Chinese policies with capitalist tendencies. It's just going to go back to hard communism, Leninism. And I just think that it was a failure of imagination. So again, I would, part of it was just anything the president does must be wrong. Part of it was a failure of imagination. And there's some very good studies coming out now that are showing why everyone has been wrong. That the measurement problems on the increase in goods prices. There's a study from not a friend of the administration, the San Francisco Fed, with 150 years of data. I would refer everyone to that shows that tariffs do not cause inflation, that they're actually disinflationary.
For decades, the global economy ran on one assumption. Free trade would keep everything efficient, cheap, and stable. But with the advent of algorithms and AI, that assumption is gone. Trade is no longer about efficiency, it's about who is in control, who owns the supply chains, and who owns the money that they operate in. Trade policy is now a national security policy. This is what financial analyst Lynn Alden has been warning us about for years. Take a look.
As the pandemic showed the world just how fragile supply chains and the just-in-time inventory model is, it seems like the deglobalization theme is now spreading around the world. So will this be an inflationary force as countries need to rebuild domestic manufacturing and very likely face higher labor costs as well?
That's my expectation, at least around the margins. And so, of course, deglobalization does not mean we just stop globalizing, right? We don't just end all globalization, but it means we can stop increasing globalization and maybe pull some of it back. So one simple way to measure it is global trade as a percentage of global GDP. And so, that was rising throughout the 1800s. Then, of course, between World War I and World War II, that was on this lengthy contraction period. It never went to zero, but of course, it started going down. After the resolution of World War II, it went up pretty significantly, and then especially accelerated in the the 90s and thereafter, because you had the opening of China, and then you had the collapse of the Soviet Union, which brought a number of Eastern European and Central Asian countries to the broader markets. And so basically there was this big untapped pool of labor. And so a lot of companies around the world did geographic arbitrage. They said, okay, well, we can pay these people 50 cents an hour and eventually increase it to $1 an hour and $1.50 an hour as they get more developed to make things for us. And that even when you ship it across the world, it ends up being cheaper than paying someone, $15 an hour in the US. And so that was a very disinflationary force combined with, modern electronics and software. The problem is that's not permanent, right? That can only persist so long. Eventually, those markets get quite developed. So right now, China has become more developed, and also, of course, there's this brewing Cold War between the United States and China. They're more economic rivals at this point, and it hollows out the U.S. industrial base so much that you start to get rising populism and political challenges back home. And in other countries that did this, because not every developed country outsourced their supply chain the way that the United States did. They still make stuff in Japan. They still make stuff in Germany, for example. Italy has a current account surplus despite its other problems. They actually have a decent manufacturing base in the northern part of the country. And of course, in the United States, we do make some things, but as a whole, we run this structural trade deficit that's starting to become a political problem. And so I do think we've kind of run this course. COVID kind of put the final nail in the coffin there when it became more of a national security issue about your ability to get ventilators, ability to get masks, basically ability to make things you need.
Fragmented worlds don't need better money. They need neutral money, which I guess is better money. So I guess they need better money. But Bitcoin doesn't care about borders. It doesn't need trade agreements, and it doesn't get stuck inside anyone's political agenda. When trade breaks and systems harden, Bitcoin routes around it. Like Waze. I mean, I don't really use Waze. My wife uses Waze way more than I use Waze. I use Google Maps mostly. Did I just say Waze more? Yes, I did. Moving on. So our first bullish takeaway for 2026, as trade fragments, Bitcoin becomes the settlement layer nobody has to trust. They can verify. Number 2. Did anyone notice inflation isn't making headlines anymore? If you just look at Google Trends, the term inflation had a huge spike back in August 2022 as prices were increasing due to the lockdown printing. But since then, interest in the idea has died down, and that's the problem. Inflation is stickier than a bottle of Elmer's glue. Spoiler alert, there are some scenes from the new Stranger Things season in this episode, just to let you know. Inflation embeds itself in prices, as no one expects to be paid less than before. This makes it politically untouchable. Central banks can't crush it either with higher interest rates without breaking some unforeseen system in the economy, and they can't fully ease without reigniting it. So they stall and they gaslight. Inflation doesn't have to spike to destroy purchasing power. It just has to linger.
Because I feel like even the history of money, which so many of us explore, right, as Bitcoiners, beads and shells to early coins, which got coin clipped and they inflated, and it was the fall of empires, which we never learned that perspective in school. And then the paper money, because obviously gold had its physical limitations, paper money built on top of it. It seems like the natural state of human society has been to inflate when you can.
So again, this is why I needed to go in stages for this, and then you can push back if something's not true, because this is the thing that's so hard to grasp. So what does that mean? What I just described? What it means is we have never lived in a global free market. You have no reference frame for what I'm talking about. No one on the planet has a reference frame for what I'm talking about. The way your brain will compare things is compare from what has existed before and then try to make an association with what the new thing is. And what's happening on Bitcoin is it's imposing a new set of rules, and it's ruining people's reference frame. It's imposing what I just described, you actually, if you're living in Bitcoin, you're living in the start of the first global free market the world has ever seen.
Bitcoin doesn't protest the system, but it does react to it. Bitcoin is so powerful that it can operate within our current fiat inflationary system and live outside of it simultaneously, using inflation's own power against itself from within. Like that one scene in the recent Stranger Things where Will takes control of Vecna for like a second and breaks his legs and tells Max like, Max, run, run, Max, run. And Vecna's like, get out of my head. Yeah, that's Bitcoin. The number 2 bullish takeaway for 2026 is that Bitcoin thrives in slow monetary decay, not just crisis. Number 3, AI, a productivity boom, a capital sink. Bitcoin absorbs the shock, like pumps back in the 90s. AI is transformative, like wheelies, but expensive, like Yeezys. Oh, Yeezys aren't expensive anymore? Oh, okay, got it. But aside from my hilarious footwear jokes, what most people miss is that AI isn't software, it's infrastructure.
But here's what's bullish for the Bitcoin miners is that the biggest AI spend in the world right now for data centers for AI is in Abilene, Texas. Stargate basically is a $500 billion spend. What is this facility in Abilene, Texas? There were Bitcoin miners. It was Bitcoin miners who pioneered and found the electricity that was sourced by solar, wind, and flare gas. And it was surplus. No electricity is being created. In were the pioneers, were the Bitcoin miners, Caruso, and they established that. And then you have Core Scientific, CoreWeave trying to take over Core Scientific because the Bitcoin miners found the stranded electricity. What did Hive do? Hive went to northern Sweden where they had surplus electricity. Then Hive went to Paraguay where there's even a greater amount, and we're building these big data centers. It will be the stepping stone. The Bitcoin miners are the pioneers for AI. And why is AI so important? Because the big military spending in Europe needs AI data centers. They need them here because a lot of the weaponry is going to be autonomous. Autonomous cars, that's all we think of. No, it's going to be humanoids by Tesla. It's going to be autonomous tanks, autonomous submarines, but they all need AI data centers. So who are the pioneers? Are Bitcoin mine data centers. And what you could see is the data centers in America all of a sudden being all converted to AI data centers and no Bitcoin mining. That's what you could see because they've been able to source that. But the spend is much bigger than anyone believes. And I know because we're the first to do it. We're the first to do hedging. We're the first to hedge electricity, and we're the first to take our AI chips, NVIDIA chips, to do AI from mining Ethereum. When Ethereum went away from proof of work to proof of stake, we pivoted, and now we have 10,000 customers renting our chips.
Data centers, energy, chips, debt. Bitcoin miners didn't follow AI, they built the foundation for it. And as AI concentrates power and capital, governments spend more, corporations lever more, and financial abstraction increases more. Bitcoin benefits not because AI exists, but because AI accelerates leverage. So my number 3 takeaway for 2026 is that Bitcoin becomes the hard collateral in an AI leveraged world. Number 4, stimulus. Ooh, I just got stimulated. Fiscal policy replaces discipline, and Bitcoin prices the consequence. Does that make sense? By 2026, monetary policy is secondary, and fiscal policy is everything. I know, but what's the difference between fiscal policy and monetary policy? Fiscal policy uses government spending and taxes to influence the economy controlled by the legislative/executive branches, while monetary policy uses interest rates and money supply managed by the central bank. Ooh, the central bank, like the Federal Reserve, with the key difference between who controls it, governments versus central banks, and how taxes/spending versus money/rates both aim for stable growth, but fiscal policy directly affects budgets while monetary policy influences borrowing costs and money flow. Deficits aren't temporary and spending isn't structural. Debt isn't being paid down, it's getting rolled. And as Preston Pish says, governments don't default anymore, they debase.
For the person who's not intimately familiar with all the terminology and the nuances of macroeconomics, explain it in very simple language, in your opinion, what's taking place right now.
I think we're heading towards what I would call a polycrisis of sorts. There's a whole bunch of things coming together at once. For starters, the fiscal situation, which was for all of the hubbub about tariff receipts, and they were a record. So we had record tariff receipts, and we had record all-time high receipts overall. The fact is we're still at, when you look at true interest expense, which is gross interest expense plus entitlement pay-goes plus Veterans Affairs benefits, you're still 96%-ish as a percent of receipts that are all-time highs. So we're still right in that hot zone of, if anything slows down, you're going to be right back over 100%. You're right back into print or default mode, and they always choose print. They have to. Furthermore, we're now seeing early signs of stress in the overnight funding markets. There's a variety of views on that. Mine is that it is essentially, we're now 30 months into the U.S. shifting issuance to the front end because there's not enough demand at the back end. And as a result, Besant has a red queen or Axl Rose problem, if you will. I used to do a little, but the little wouldn't do it. So the little got more and more, or the red queen, I got to run faster and faster to stay in the same spot. There's more and more issuance coming, right? So 2013, we were rolling about $100 billion of T-bills a week per Secretary of the Treasury, Jack Lew. Now it's $550 billion per week being rolled per my friend Andy Constant. And so that requires having a greater level of money in the Treasury General Account, or TGA, which Besant is doing, which is in turn putting overnight funding strains on overnight funding markets, akin to a little bit like what we saw in 2019. So you're seeing tightening liquidity there and sort of spot applications of liquidity in terms of standing repo facility being borrowed against in a bigger way than we have seen ever before. It's back to basically nothing, but 2 weeks ago on Halloween, it was $50 billion overnight. So that's not a problem that's going to go away.
Bitcoin replaces these systems of soft variable policies with hardened immutable ones. So number 4, my bullish takeaway for 2026, the more permanent stimulus becomes, the more attractive fixed supply money looks. Number 5, divergence. Growth continues, just not evenly. The world isn't collapsing, it's splintering. Some regions outperform, others stagnate. Capital chases stability. This is where Bitcoin quietly wins. It doesn't need synchronized growth. It doesn't depend on one economy. And as Mark Moss often says, when systems diverge, portable capital matters more than perfect returns. Does Mark Moss often say that?
It's like, you wouldn't put all your money in one stock. Why do you have your whole life in one country when you don't have to? Why not have bank accounts in multiple countries and trust in multiple countries? And why not have multiple passports? Like, why not just be sovereign? And so I was actually working with an attorney in the network at the time to establish a residency in Panama, get a bank account going in Panama, because I was trying to get money out of the banking system. I still thought the banking system was fragile. I thought another 2008 collapse could come because the system didn't get fixed. It only got worse. And so I was trying to get money out of the banking system. But the thing is that, was it really getting money out of the system? Because the global financial system is global. And so around 2015, I was working with this attorney, and I took another look at Bitcoin. And it was like, wait a minute, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get money out of the system. And I tell that part of the story because so many people today, smart people, wealthy people, prominent people, you'll see them all online saying, but what's even the use case? And why is there utility? And why is there even a need? And it's because they don't understand the problems that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a little bit of a chuckle, but they don't, right? I mean, I'm in New York City living in my $5 million condo and drinking $20 Manhattans. And like, you don't really understand the problems that people may have in Afghanistan or North Korea or whatever. And so only because I understood the problem and because I was actively this is a key piece, because I was actively looking for a solution to my problem. You've heard the story of Michael Saylor, I'm sure, quite often. He talks about in 2020 how they came around to Bitcoin. He had $500 million and he realized it was a melting ice cube. And he's like, what are we going to do with this $500 million? I have an acute problem. I need to do something with this 500 million. I am going to go look for all the potential solutions so I can find one. So it starts from that point. And so all these people online, they're like, what's the use case? They don't have a problem. And or they don't have a problem that Bitcoin fixes for them at this point. And so for me, that was my problem, trying to get money out of the banking system, trying to sort of distribute that risk. And that's when I took another look at Bitcoin and it just clicked for me. Oh, this is exactly what I'm trying to do, get money out of the banking system. And so I started buying Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is portable, permissionless, and it's globally liquid. So my bullish takeaway number 5 for 2026, divergence doesn't kill Bitcoin. It justifies it. Ooh, interesting. Bitcoin being in extreme fear doesn't mean it failed. It means the market is staring at the symptoms and missing the structure. Fragmentation, inflation, AI, stimulus, divergence. These aren't bearish forces, they're Bitcoin's environment. And if history rhymes at all, extreme fear is where conviction gets rewarded. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you hit that like button below, or you can subscribe to the Simply Bitcoin channel for more content like this. We're coming out with it every single day of the week. Also, do not forget to hit that notification bell. I'm Oceans. This is Beyond Bitcoin. Until next time.